Sports build champions and leaders, but every champion has moments of struggle, pressure, anxiety, burnout, and those moments deserve real support. PAX Health is proud to sponsor the New Jersey Lacrosse podcast because they believe mental health care should be available when you need it, as you need it. Therapy and psychiatric services for kids, teens, communities, and families. Telehealth and in-person appointments are available within 48 hours. PAX Health, people helping people. Visit pax.health. That's PAX.health. JAG Physical Therapy, providing rehabilitative recovery from sports and soft tissue injuries to knee, foot, ankle, hip, shoulder, elbow, and back injuries. Schedule your appointment with JAG Physical Therapy today and meet their experienced team of physical therapists, occupational therapists, athletic trainers, and exercise physiologists invested in your full recovery. Get back the life you love at JAG Physical Therapy, the most awarded physical therapy provider in New Jersey, New York, and Pennsylvania. For more information or to make an appointment, just visit jagpt.com. That's JAGPT.com. Lacrosse families, meet Orgo, the calendar app that actually thinks like a sports parent. Orgo syncs with team apps you already use and enriches schedules with real-world logistics. Every event shows travel times, early arrival buffers, carpool assignments, conflict alerts, and time-specific weather so you know what gear to pack. Get your athletes on it too. Orgo teaches time literacy, an executive skill for life. One subscription, whole family. Code LAX25 is 25% off. Just $44 locks in sanity for the whole year. Visit www.orgohq.com. That's www.orgohq.com. This is the New Jersey Lacrosse Podcast. I'm your host, Keith Glock.
I'm Bill Farr.
I'm Anthony Terranova.
And this here is Gil Swenson. Welcome to the New Jersey Lacrosse Podcast. As my good friend John Oliver would say, welcome to this edition of the New Jersey Lacrosse Podcast. Boys, how we doing? No Gil Swenson again this week. Bill Tharp and Anthony Terranova. How you doing, boys?
Good after probably one of the craziest weeks in terms of upsets I can remember in high school lacrosse in a while. It was definitely a very crazy Saturday.
It was crazy getting off the field Saturday and just scanning through my phone and just seeing the updates from you guys about all the crazy stuff. I think this was probably the craziest Saturday that I can ever remember in terms of scores and upsets and just going back and forth with each other about all the as the scores were rolling in. So what a week of lacrosse for sure.
Our opening face-off tonight will deal with some things that we have seen as surprises. We'll get into the score recap from last week, the games that we're looking forward to this week. Pick'em is getting a little bit disparate. It's getting just a little bit of a tease there, Tharpy. I hope that maybe you got some crutches because you're a little wounded in the Pick'em. And then, of course, we'll get to our stall warning question along with the top 20. But as we get to our opening face-off, the draw has happened, and I have directed the face-off to the wing to Mr. Anthony Terranova and take us into the first possession of this game.
Yeah, so this week for the opening face-off, I kind of was going through and all these crazy upsets and all these back-end top 20 teams that we're trying to decipher and go through and figure out. There's a crazy parity circle going on with like Ramapo, Lakes, Bergen Catholic, and so it's like just trying to figure out the back end top 20 is near possible. But as we're going through it, I kind of asked the group, and then right as I asked the group, I said, no, actually wait, let's talk about this on the podcast first. And of course, Gil's not here, so it'd be a little bit of a more intellectual conversation as we would have had more teams to kind of go over. But I guess the question here is, we're pretty much halfway through the season, a little more. What teams do we feel have really surprised us in terms of greatness, in terms of good, and then obviously in terms of teams that have surprised us not in a good way. There's certainly I'll let I'm gonna obviously piggyback this over to Tharp so he can actually give me his kind of takes. So I'll just, instead of breaking down what I view, I'm just gonna kind of name the names off, and I'm sure one of these are the teams that Tharp will kind of go and piggyback off of a little bit more if he wants to talk about any of them. But I think teams that kind of really have surprised us, positively, has been Scotch Plains Fanwood, Westmore Central, Madison, Homedale, with their great win over CBA this past weekend, getting a lot of good wins there. So I think some of those teams, obviously there's more, but I think teams that we didn't really have on our radar, especially West Morris, Madison, Homedale, to start the season off. We had are definitely the most surprising. And then we had Scotch Plains Fan start the season off in the back half of our bottom five, the top 20, and now they're pretty much top five. A little bit spoiler alert there. And then teams that I think are really underperforming are teams that we thought were going to be a lot better, and some are certainly more drastic than others. But Mountain Lakes, CBA, Kingsway, who I know Gil would be all over if he was on this, and Manasquan, teams that were all in our top 10 that really have not lived up to the hype or expectation that I think that we thought. And again, this is the expectation that we thought. Who knows what the people in the town think, or what other people on the outside. Just the three of us, what we think, and those kind of differences. So I'm just curious to see what what the group thinks as well. If there's any more to add to the list, or anyone else you want to kind of touch base on a little bit more.
Yeah, I think when you first posed the question to us, the one that immediately came to mind for me was Mountain Lakes. I was super high on them. I think, for the past few years, I've been kind of like, Mountain Lakes is great. They certainly benefit from being in, one of the weaker groups. But I thought super high of them. I think I had them highest in the preseason of all of you guys. I remember like they returned a lot, especially offensively. I've seen a lot of their players play, whether it's in club or whatever. So I thought very highly of them. So, for them to, it's not that they're just struggling, it's not like they've had a string of competitive losses. If I kind of, they're on a 3-game losing streak. None of the games are particularly close. They 5-goal loss to Chatham, a pretty decent loss this weekend to, I believe it was Ramapo. And then, not ultra competitive with Ridgewood. So, and, you think in a vacuum, right? Losing to Chatham and Ridgewood, those aren't awful losses, but it's the score and the way they lost those games. And then, losing to Ramapo by as much as they did. Ramapo's been a fringe top 20 team for us. They're on the outside looking in, after suffering a tough loss to Bergen. So, for me, obviously that Lakes was the one that I was, really disappointed in. I think, of the teams you mentioned, we had CBA super high, and I gotta bust Keith's balls a little bit there. Two of the three teams that he named as teams on the rise were Mountain Lakes and CBA, and really really tough weekend for CBA. Always the caveat that John Little was going to be back, and Little played on Saturday against Homedale, and tough loss for CBA. So I don't necessarily disagree that CBA won't be improved, but sitting at 6-4 on the season, with a handful of losses that you would deem surprising to Haddonfield and Homedale, and then like I said, Lakes on that pretty uncompetitive losing streak. As for the teams that are surprising positively, I would be remiss to not say Pingree. That's been the we've talked enough about them, but West Morris, like you said, and then Scotch Plains. I thought really highly of Scotch Plains coming, and I meant it when Coach Baselli was on. I was super high on them, so it's pretty cool to see them pan out. So, but I thought that was a great topic, Nov, and I'm glad we were able to dive into it a little more.
Yeah, did forget to mention Haddonfield also is another team that has certainly surprised us, particularly me, so far into this season. Kingsway we mentioned just hasn't really kind of gotten, like, they're winning games, but we deem them to be, they should be dominating every single one of these games that they're playing. They're not necessarily doing that. They're just squeaking by. And then Manasquan, we had them in the very, towards the very bottom of our preseason, but they're just, certainly struggling in terms of, finding their identity right now. So, those are other teams that, we just wanted to, touch base on. But
Yeah, I mean, Maswan's 0-4 in their short division, which is, I don't even. I saw on Instagram it was like the first home dog beat Maswan for the first time since 2013. RBR just beat them, so yeah, Manasquan is definitely struggling, and I know we're going to talk about them a lot. I would also throw Bosco in that boat a little bit, coming in, only one in-state win as well. I would just throw them in there as a team that I think on paper, should be performing a little bit better. But
I am going to double down on the fact that you've attempted to call me out on what I said last week about Lakes and CBA, and I believe, and you could go back and quote me because I'm fairly certain of what I said, was if you're going to get them, you better get them now, because by the time we get to May 5th, 10th, whatever date I used, it's going to be a lot more difficult. So I would argue that Haddonfield and Lakes' opponents and like everybody was like, okay, I guess we better get them now. All right, so we got them now. They got. And, oh, Keith, you said, oh, when John Little comes back, CBA. So you mean to say that a player's first game of the season, maybe necessarily we don't get to kick off a little bit of rust? I have no problem with what I said last week. I doubled down on it. Lakes, Bridgewater, CBA. Beware of playing those teams over the next couple weeks because it's only going to get harder.
Your argument, but like especially a face-off guy, like if you don't think that kid hasn't been at FOA or practicing, like we scrimmaged CBA, he scrimmaged against us. I just I don't know that you made some like your arguments is fine, but saying that kid needs to knock off some rust, I'm gonna push back on that one. But otherwise, fair point, fair point. I mean, like we said, Lakes has the benefit of being in. I was just perusing Lax numbers today, and it's crazy how it's crazy to me how North one, or excuse me, how Group One North and South ends up being split just based on town size. Because schools like Madison, Glen Ridge, there are some other ones that are like Bernards that are so clearly in my mind, you would say, oh, they have to be Group One North, but they're Group One South just because of how it's split up. And it's like Mountain Lakes is number one in Group One North, and they're still like rated well in Lax Summers. They're like a 88, 89, and then like the second place is like an 80. So that means like the Group One North sectional is like a 9 goal differential, which is just crazy to me. So I mean, Lakes is going to be there just because of the group, but yeah, it was very funny timing of you, like because you don't make proclamations often, like you, not that you don't have educated opinions. It was funny, like you stood up and you're like, these teams are gonna do it, and then it was just like, I don't know, it was just funny for us because, like I said, you don't. It's just part of your job. You don't like stand on your chair and beat your chest too often. So we had to poke a little fun at you, Mr. Glock.
That's fine. And you know what? If I'm wrong, that's fine too. I will also tell you that relative. I know one of you said West Morris was a moderate surprise. I had West Morris this week, and I was pretty impressed. I thought that their attack was very solid. I'll be interested to see. They didn't really. The game ended up being a little bit disparate as things went on, so they didn't have to be super remarkably disciplined. But if they're forced to run, like sprint every time you have the ball, as we know is true when when your attack is playing an elite team, and when they have to make all good decisions, I will tell you that from a skill-based perspective, I was very impressed with West Morris. So we'll see how things go as things go on there. So let's get into our score recap from last week. Tharp, I know you wanted to touch quickly on Haddonfield CBA, which, by the way, which was Tuesday, Haddonfield 6, CBA 4.
Yeah, I mean, hat tip to Nova. He had this one. I know Gil posted the clip on social because it was an early game. He's been all over Haddonfield, and like we said, kind of competitive game with St. Augustine, and Augie's pulled away, but um, good win for them. 6-4. I watched some of the game. I think Haddonfield has to fine tune some things in terms of like shooting and stuff like that. They weren't hitting the cage every time but I thought they were able to get to some really, really good spots on the field. I thought they were really disciplined defensively. They had a good face-off performance. They're just a really well-oiled machine. They're really well-rounded. And obviously, CBA, they they have a style, they have a way that they play. They are they're well coached. It's not like they're poorly coached, but I think that like they're gonna run into an issue sometimes where um if they let the horses run a little bit, they might be able to find a little more success. I think everything is, you know, like back in the day, Nova, when you guys were at Monty and you guys would play 100 and Central, right? It was like some stuff was like super scripted and it was like you knew what was coming. I think that, if CBA lets the horses out of the stable a little bit more, they're going to be able to find a little more success because, they are supremely talented. They have a lot of good individual talent, but I think Haddonfield is just playing really, really well as a team right now.
Rumson defeated Southern 12-11 as we continue our look back from last week. Madison by a goal 9-8 over Glen Ridge. And then as we move into the weekend, we had Westfield against Shawnee, Terra Nova, a game that you had the ability to officiate and ended Westfield 12 and Shawnee 9. I know that, and by the way, for anybody that doesn't really realize this, I'm going to give you kudos for giving us some analysis of the game because as an official, we only see a third of the game sometimes. But from the zebra stripes on the field, what were your impressions of Westfield over Shawnee?
Yeah, again, we can really only talk about big picture stuff, not being able to really see what schemes and offensive stuff they're running when we're trying to ref a game. But Shawnee went up 4-0 right off the bat. It was really impressive. I was like, oh my goodness, like I didn't really have any eyes on Shawnee yet. They didn't really play really any competitive in-state teams. So this was really my first look at them, and they went up 4-0. They were like running down alleys, stinging corners, pushing the ball in transition, playing. I was like, okay, wow, like this. I knew they were good. I didn't know they were this good. Then Westfield called timeout, and then it was pretty much all Westfield after that, which was kind of impressive to see. But I think at the same time too, kind of talks a little bit to the schedule Westfield has played so far: Scotch Plains and Chatham and Summit, Seton Hall. Like, these guys are battle tested. They have been up, they have been down. I mean, they were losing to Seton Hall for most of the game, came back. So like these guys were it was very interesting to hear what the sidelines and the huddles were saying. It was very, very telling where, Westfield's down 4-0 and they're like, guys, we've been here before. Let's just run our stuff, with certainly some choice words in there. Let's just do what we do and we're going to be in good shape. Like, this game is just another game for us. And then, on the Shawnee side, come like fourth quarter when it's like a one goal game, they're like, guys, we need to stop freaking out. Like, they're like panicking. Like we just got to run our sets, run our systems. Like, it's going to be okay, guys. Like, just give them the ball. Like, it was very frantic within the huddle. And it was, so I think that was very kind of telling where the score kind of ended up the way it was. But both teams are incredibly talented. This Westfield kind of took advantage of situations. And quite frankly, I think if Shawnee just clears the ball better, they win that game. Shawnee literally, I think, maybe then four like freebies in the clear. Like, defenseman picked it up, trying to run through three guys, lost it behind him. Westfield was right there just to catch and shoot instead of running open space. So both teams are still very worthy of praise. Are still two of the best teams in the state without question. Shawnee's going to make some noise at the end of the year here, but it was certainly impressive to see. It was very, it was good physical game. Not a lot of flags at all when the boys got to play. They kind of, showed on the field, but Westfield took advantage of all the opportunities. That's what, teams that win games, win championships tend to do, is they capitalize on other teams' mistakes.
A game that when we get into our top 20, I can't remember if it was Nova, you, or it was Gil that said it 3 weeks ago, I believe, because I had raised the issue that perhaps Homedale was worth a look. And I believe somebody said, hey, they play CBA in a couple weeks, and if they beat CBA, they'll definitely get ranked for sure. And so we'll see if that played itself out as Holmdel topped CBA 9-8 this week. A game that has potentially been dubbed by some experts as the biggest upset of the year, and that says a lot in this particular year where seemingly upsets are becoming more and more normal. Northern Highlands 7 and Don Bosco 6. Nova, are you in the camp of that being the biggest upset of the year so far?
Yeah, I think I have to be in that that bubble right now, and honestly, it might be one of the bigger upsets in years. I mean, if you're looking at the lax numbers, you're looking at the rosters. Um, Bosco was an 11 goal favorite, and that Northern Highlands have been a little bit all over the place with their scores. They definitely have some playmakers. Ethan Sue's an absolute freak of nature. But I think on paper, no one expected that. Again, 11 goal favorite, and they end up losing. I don't think we need to go too much into it, but it's certainly a game that deserves recognition. And it's certainly one I think will be talked about for the rest of the year and probably for a year or two to come.
And the game that I think everybody had on their radar as the one to watch this year if you weren't on the field playing, and that was a Saturday noon face-off where Seton Hall Prep defeated number one in our poll, Del Barton, 9-7. Tharp, what happened?
Yeah, I mean, what it's crazy, man. It's like, we said before the game and like, oh, is this like the least hyped Seton Hall to Barton game in God knows how long, and it felt like such a inevitability that Barton was going to win, and then all of a sudden, Glock had some eyes on the ground over there, and we're getting texts. It's 3-0, it's 5-1 at halftime, and all of a sudden, Seton Hall does the damn thing. And I think the final score is a little closer than the game actually was. Barton got two back-to-back super late. Um, but I think the game started, and you could tell right away. Um, Seton Hall was a much improved team from the last time I saw them really in depth against Westfield. I think the thing that I noticed right away, they were much more disciplined offensively. I think they had a game plan. And they were going to stick to it. They were much less helter skelter. The game started with a great shot. You think the Del Barton goalie probably wants it back, but they go up 1-0, and then Del Barton's winning faceoffs, but they're not completing the possession all the way through. So all of a sudden, balls back to Seton Hall. Uh, Errant shot bounces off somebody, and the Del Barton goalie comes out to try to make a play. Seton Hall ends up scoring an open net goal. It's 2-0. Then from there it kind of just everything went Seton Hall's way, it felt like. And even though, like I said, Del Barton was winning faceoffs, and I think all in all they won something like 60 to 70% of the faceoffs. Every faceoff was an absolute war. And the really big thing is if you're Seton Hall, they weren't really generating a ton of offense off the face-off wins. Kane Quinault is a fantastic face-off guy, and Jesse Denigri also had some face-offs for Del Barton, but they weren't getting a ton of instant offense off the face-off until really the end of the game. And then, defensively, you think about that score. And, one of the things that Del Barton's really struggled with over the years is as a zone. So, I thought to myself, all right, Seton Hall probably played him in a zone. And, but no, they played him straight up man to man. Really, really impressive job. And, again, looking back at that Westfield game, the one thing that I thought was, Lions had a really tough game in goal, but he has shown over the past few weeks that he's that dude in net for sure. He played super well against Summit. I think he finished with 11 saves, 11, 12 saves on Saturday. He's that guy. He's committed to Providence for a reason. Really, really great job in between the pipes for him. And Seton Hall needed that at the end of the day. I think defensively they matched up well. Jagger did a really good job on Fodor in the midfield, and then just down low defensively. I thought that Barton was really unsettled. It was there wasn't much offensive flow there wasn't much rhythm to it, and I felt that it reminded me a lot of the Seton Hall Westfield game, just the roles reversed. It was a more patient, calm, settled group against a team that was a little frenetic. And Nova's said it a million times. We've all said it. Del Barton's going to be a different team come May and June. But yeah, I think if you're Del Barton, you watch that game back and you think like, man, if we were just a little more composed, and if we just handled that a little bit better, they probably walk away from that game, with maybe a different result. But like I said, Seton Hall in total control of that game. The final score a little closer than the game probably was. Really, really respect the result. Respect to you got to tip your cap to the Seton Hall coaching staff and the players. They clearly had a game plan and executed it. And for as much as it felt like the sky was falling in for Seton Hall, at the end of the day, a one goal loss to Westfield, one goal overtime loss to Summit. Those two results look really, really good all of a sudden. So clearly they're starting to find their level, and and talking to their coaching staff, they knew they had a lot of guys to replace. They had a lot of guys stepping into big time roles for the first time. For a lot of these guys, this was their first meaningful action in a Seton Hall Del Barton game. So, they responded well. I think Del Barton's in the same boat a little bit. They had a lot of guys. It was their first time in that game. So, you could play all the nationally ranked teams in the world. You could play the St. Anthony's, the Chaminades, the Culvers, the St. Ignatius, both ways. And at the end of the day, though, this rivalry game you throw everything away, and it's just man in the arena. And on this day, Seton Hall got the best of them. But man, what a great game!
Yeah, I've said it multiple times last week, and I'll continue to say for many years to come, is that when those two teams play, anything can happen. One team could be at their absolute best, the other team could be at their absolute worst, and that's still going to be an absolute four-quarter battle with anything that can absolutely happen. And that, obviously, shout out to the Pirates for getting the job done. Again, talking to some players and coaches, a big difference on both sides. The biggest difference a lot of them had to say was goalkeeper play. So shout out to Lions for really stepping up and getting the job done for his boys.
Tharp, just so you know, because I know that you were trying to insinuate that the sky was falling in West Orange, but then forgot where Seton Hall Prep was. So it is, in fact, in West Orange, and that was where the sky was
Pirate
falling.
Nation or something, but that sounded cringy. So I was just like,
I knew where you were going, but according to your mom, I'm supposed to keep making fun of you. So every chance I have, because I dare not defy Mrs. Tharp. So here we are. Let's look ahead to the games coming up this week. We thought there were about 4 games this week that we really needed to get a little bit more in depth on. And we'll just do things chronologically because that seems to be what makes sense. We'll start out with one of those games that we think needs a little bit more analysis, and that is Chatham hosting Don Bosco, and that occurs on Tuesday.
Yeah, I think that's a massive game for both teams to kind of assert their dominance and kind of where they fall amongst the state's best. Bosco, again, I think was really a fluke over that over the Highlands. That team is just so talented, and the scores that they have has been really impressive. I think North Highland is the definition of when people say trap game. That's exactly what it was. They just played nationally ranked teams. They just played St. Anthony's to a 1-goal game, I'm pretty sure. The game before, then they had Chatham coming up, and in the middle they had Northern Highlands. So I'm going to assume that they absolutely overlooked them, but now they have to prove it. As Starp already kind of said, Bosco doesn't really have any of those signature wins yet. They got games coming up that they're starting to be able to do that and be the team that we need to do, but they need to really reinsert themselves because I still think they're a top 4 or 5 team at the end of the year here. But at this point in time, we've got to go with what the stats show, and they're not necessarily in that category right now.
I 100% agree. I think that I think the one thing I was really impressed with actually was this weekend. We didn't talk about it because the game ended up being kind of a blowout, but Chatham smoked Madison, and looking at the stats, Chatham faced off really well that game, and they have a couple of good face-off guys, but statistically they haven't really run up the face-off totals. And I think really highly of the Madison face-off guys. So to see them face off well against Madison makes me think that um, if Chatham is able to face off well against Bosco, that would be really tough for them. The big thing is going to come down to goalkeeping. We've talked about it a few times. In the super big games, the Ridgewood game, the Westfield game early in the season, Chatham hasn't had the greatest goalkeeping, so it'll be interesting to see. Can they get to 50%? I'm sure Coach Scarpello is telling the guys if we get to 50%, there's not many games we're going to lose with our offense. So that's what I'm keeping my eye on.
Another game Tuesday. West Morris will take on the Moose Mobile, Scotch Plains Fanwood. Another game that we feel like needs a little bit of analysis.
Yeah, I think it's like you said, Glock. West Morris has really burst onto the scene. I think this one's going to come down to the face-off dot. Is Nate Filler going to be able to be competitive with Luke Gauss? And if he is, I think there's a chance that Scotch Plains maybe wins this one by 4 or 5. But if Gauss is able to go 80-90% like he's been, like you said, Glock, I think West Morris has a super dynamic offense. I watched him score 8 goals in a quarter against Bernard. So they're a high power offense. I think Scotch Plains has a much better defense than they've probably seen this year, but it's going to be really, really telling matchup in terms of how competitive can they keep it with Scotch Plains and can they even pull it off?
Gauss was a much bigger kid than I thought he was going to be.
Okay.
And I was very impressed with his athletic ability. He reminded me a lot of Lucas Kopecky in terms of his body type, and the former Montgomery player turned Villanova face-off man, turned defensive midfielder, turned wide receiver who scored touchdowns on the way to Villanova going to the 1AA or whatever they call it now, national championship. So that's high praise when I compare him to Kopecky. I think on some level, as you said, they'll go as he goes. So we'll see. We'll see, because Scotch Plains obviously just an absolute wagon to use what you would say, Tharp. Wednesday, as we progress during the week, Southern and CBA will face off, as will Ramapo and Ridgewood. The third of our 4th games that requires a little bit more in-depth analysis. And you want to talk about a blue blood matchup, a midweek hump day, doesn't really matter, we're going to get you fired up kind of matchup, Summit and Westfield.
Yeah, this is an electric matchup. This is kind of on the level of seeing Hall and Delbarn when these two teams face off. It feels like over the last few years, I remember going to watch Summit Westfield play in their county championship, something like that, and that atmosphere was just as electric as any game that I have been a part of or watched. So these teams do not like each other. It is going to be an absolute war. The energy is going to be through the roof on both teams. Summit is just playing some incredibly good lacrosse right now, and they're just finding constantly ways to get it done. It's not always going to be pretty. It doesn't always look pretty, but at the end of the day, win the game. That's ultimately what matters. And Westfield's kind of on a little bit of a heater right now. They're kind of find their own a little bit. The guys are starting to kind of buy into each other and where they need to be, and kind of get on, those, off the field cues as well that they need. So it's going to be quite the electric battle between those two, and definitely a game that I wish I was, just being a spectator for, not even the coach or a ref. I just wish I could be at that game just to watch those two great teams battle each other.
Tharpy, anything on that one?
No, nailed it.
As we move through the rest of the week, Mountain Lakes and Delbarton, a game that we probably would have earmarked just as highly as Seton Hall Prep and Delbarton. And you know what? Maybe as the season goes on, it ends up being a little bit more of an intriguing matchup than what it currently is. But that Lakes Delbarton matchup will occur on Thursday. And as we move into the weekend, Ramapo will take on Sparta on Saturday. Summit and Rumson will also play Saturday. Ridgewood and Westfield also will go off Saturday, Madison and Northern Highlands Saturday, and the last of our games that require a little bit more in-depth analysis in the week ahead. On Saturday, Seton Hall Prep will take on the high-powered offense of Chatham.
I just had a thought. Isn't it crazy to think Mountain Lakes is probably going to be the 4 seed in the Morris County tournament? Because figure Del Barton will be 1, Chatham will be 2, and they lost the head-to-head to Madison. When's the last time Lakes was the 4 seed in the Morris County tournament?
Yeah, it's pulled the history books on that one.
That's crazy to think about.
And the answer might be never.
So one of the things that is a little crazy to me, not that anyone cares about this but me, but the Morris County final, forever was Mountain Lakes Del Barton, right? They would play a couple of times a year, and you'd say it doesn't matter. Morris County final is going to be it. It's going to be Lakes Del Barton, and it's going to be at Fairleigh Dickinson, and the crowd's going to be big, and it is what it is. Of all the years that I've officiated county finals, I've only done one Morris County final, and it was Del Barton and Ramapo. So I never even got the Lakes Del Barton matchup, but it is what it is. It was a great year for Kevin Kelly when Kev was there at Ramapo in those years, and the game didn't disappoint in terms of how that particular game went. But I romanticize having had that Lakes Del Barton game, and it's just never really happened. I think I've only officiated that game at any point, maybe one time in my life. So
here's an off-brand question for you, Glock. Is there a team in New Jersey high school that you have not reffed that you wish you have?
Oh boy.
Or have you touched everybody already? Have you got them all?
No, I would have to look at it honestly, because I haven't thought about it, and there's somebody that I would leave out, right? And that wouldn't be fair. So how about this? I promise you I'll take a look at it, and I'll get back to you for next week's show.
Perfect.
So let's move on to our pick'em. Tharpy, you took one right in the what?
Wait, we didn't. I derailed us. We got to talk about Seton Hall Chatham. I'm sorry. That's on me. Hand up.
Okay.
We didn't say a word about Seton Hall Chatham. That's on me. I'm gonna own that one.
Take it away.
Go ahead.
Well, speaking of Morris County, obviously, huge week for Chatham. Doesn't get much bigger than having Bosco and Seton Hall in the same week. I think again it's going to come down to the face-off battle and goalie play, and I think that Chatham has some good individual pieces defensively. You've seen by some of their scores that they've given up. They've had some games where they've given up a decent goal total. So will they be able to limit Seton Hall's opportunities? Will Seton Hall be able to remain disciplined? And at the end of the day, what's the matchup's going to be like in terms of the defensively? I'm really looking forward to Jagger versus Shep Boyd in the midfield. That's going to be a really, really impressive battle. And then, down low, you got to figure it's probably going to be Sean Hayes on Nick Lagunowicz. So, there's going to be some really interesting individual battles there. But man, what a week for Chatham.
So I want to do our pick'em first before the top 20, because I feel like we're going to have some discussion there. Tharpy, you took it the pooper in the top 20 or in the pick'em last week, mostly because Gil had a 5-0 week. So you went down an extra set of games. You were 3-2. You continue to be on that just above. You're positively mediocre. It's the best I can give you right now on the season. Gil has a 3-game lead now on the season. He's 14-6 compared to your 11-9. And the first game this week that we're going to pick is going to be Milburn and A.L. Johnson. And because Gil is ahead of you, I will pick first for him. And he has selected that team from Clark, the home of Matt Posca and Brian Fuchs, A.L. Johnson over Milburn. What say you?
See, I don't. My God, I'm so mad that he's not here. I tried. Usually, I'll give you a peek behind the curtains. Usually, I like to highlight different teams, people we never talk about. And that's how you end up with some random games where it's like, and then you go to lax numbers, and it's like a 12 goal spread. So of course we're gonna both get it. So I try to pick games that are within, a lot tighter this week. Because I also don't like to repeat teams, and I already used AL Johnson this year. Um, and I got my boys at AL Johnson. I got a selfie after they won their first game because they did it for me, and I can't pick against them. But I'm not going to be able to gain ground on Gil here. I I got to stay with AL Johnson because I got to do it for the boys. But man, it stinks that he picked them.
Nova, what do you make of Tharp proclaiming that the boys at AL Johnson got a win for him?
That's it. It's the only reason why they won.
They
Not
didn't
their
do it for no. They didn't do it for me. But
It's literally
it
what you just said.
That's
no. But you're a teacher, you don't always take things literally. It's like it's just it was funny that the first thing they did after they won the game was like send me a selfie as like we got it done. So they didn't do it for me, but they were excited to let me know they got the job done. And I want them to get the job done again against Milburn. Is that more fair statement?
very fair.
Did it for you. Good job. Okay, understood. Uh,
Also, they lost the pick'em, but shout out to the Montgomery. Coach Thigpen, huge win on Saturday over Voorhees. I know they lost the pick'em, but I was really happy for Coach Jamar. I know he's busting his ass over there at Montgomery. So, big win for them Saturday. I just wanted to. I know he was disappointed after they lost. He's like, sorry, we couldn't get it done in pick'em, but I was very happy for him that they got that because that's a big win for them. So
I don't.
again, I apologize for taking us off the rails.
That's okay. But I'll keep us off the rails because I think that when there's praise deserved, it needs to be doled out. And anytime we can give insight into people that the world of lacrosse in the state of New Jersey may not know, and I say this not because I work at Montgomery, but maybe working at Montgomery has given me the opportunity to get to know Jamar Thigpen a little bit more than I otherwise might. And to say that there's somebody that I would quote unquote root for now, because obviously I'm not, able to officiate Montgomery for good reasons. Boy, if you don't like Jamar Thigpen, then you also don't like ice cream or other pizza or whatever else would be relatively universally accepted as fantastic. Then that's who you are if you don't like Jamar Thigpen. So I echo your sentiments, Tharp, about a victory over Voorhees. Our next game in the pick'em, Bernards and Caldwell. Tharp, you go first on this one.
We all know I ride and die for the Skylands. Give me the Mountaineers. Go Bernards.
You have a little difference here. Gil going with Caldwell.
Yes, let's go.
There you go. Our third game this week that I can assure you was going to be spicy. Southern will take on CBA, and Gil is going with Southern Regional.
I love it. I'm taking CBA. Go Colts. Coach Sofield, get it done, boy. Come on.
I was going to say, if you went
Fighting
against
Keith
that,
Glocks, let's go.
Sofield would have crawled through your computer screen and because he obviously doesn't belong in your computer screen, and we can add that to the places that Coach Sofield doesn't belong, which is to say on the field this week, which I believe he was penalized for. So I'll shove that little dig here into the podcast, and we'll move on to.
No.
Yep, no, I did it. Fourth game this week, Union Catholic and JP Stevens. Tharp, you go first on this one, buddy.
Hey, this is the never mind.
You picked the games. You don't get to say this is anything. You're the one that decided that this was a game that should be picked.
Someone's O is gonna go. I'm gonna go with Union Catholic. Give me Union.
No agreement, or I'm sorry, agreement on this one. Gil also going Union Catholic.
Those are favorites, so makes sense.
Dynamite dropping, Durno. And our final game of the pick'em this week, Sparta and Ramapo. And the absentee dad of the year in the most ironic way possible. We'll pick first on this one, and Gil is going to go with Ramapo.
All right, I gotta go for it. I'm gonna go Sparta. Sparta's graded out really well on lax numbers. I haven't had a chance to see them in person. Ramapo's kind of been all over the place, so I don't know. Give me Sparta.
Okay.
You do this every year, Mark. You start chasing and just.
I'm on tilt. I'm on tilt.
Yeah, it's a losing philosophy, Tharp. Just pick with your brain. All right.
All
right,
this is like whose line is it anyway?
Don't go to a casino where you start losing all your money. You're like, if I start betting more and more money, I'll win it back.
It's like whose line is it anyway? The points are made up and nothing matters anyway. So
there you
also,
go.
if you're looking for a great casino buddy, Nova's a great casino buddy guy. That's all I'll say.
If only I had the Tony Reale mute button for you, Tharp, in Around the Horn. Let's move on to our top 20. And I try to color code our top 20 just visually for me so that I can see, did teams move up? Did teams move down? Makes it a little bit easier for me to talk about. And I would say just visually looking at our top 20, there's a lot of teams that moved up this week. So we moved a few teams, a smaller number of teams maybe shifted some positions, and a couple of unranked teams found their way in. But by and large, people got shifted up the poll this week. So we'll start from 20 and we'll work our way up to number 1. CBA, this was the biggest faller in our top 20 this week. The Colts go from 11 down to 20. Southern goes from 18 to 19. Glen Ridge, the second biggest faller on the poll, goes from 13 to 18. Madison stands pat at number 17. Rumson into the top 20 after being unranked at number 16. Haddonfield unranked comes all the way up to number 15. Pingree moves up a couple of spots from 19 to 14. Gill comes from 16 to 13. West Morris up to number 12. Bridgewater 11. And Shawnee falls from number 5 down to number 10. What is the takeaway, or what are the takeaways, I should say, from the second half of our top 20 this week, boys?
The bottom of our top 20 from like 16 to 20 and then some is a nightmare every week. There's so many teams that are deserving and not deserving at the same time to be in those slots. And like I said earlier, there was already like that circle of parity where we had a bunch of teams where we were debating, and I personally couldn't even come up with like a number 20 team, because any team that I slotted in there, I had an immediate argument against myself why that team shouldn't be in the top 20 spot, and this team already beat them, why they wouldn't be there. And then I'd be, okay, well then I'll put that team in there. And then that team, I had an immediate argument for why they shouldn't be in there. You know, what I already talked about, the Bergen beating Ramapo beating Lakes losing to Ramapo. Like, there's just so many teams that have beat each other out, you know, kind of punching back and forth, that it's incredibly hard to come up with the bottom half of, I wouldn't say the bottom full half, but certainly the last 4 or 5 spots in our ranking is incredibly tough, especially after this week with the amount of upsets that did happen.
Yeah, I like everything after Pingree was like a disaster. Like it was like, because even it's hard because it's like okay, so like Rumson enters, and it's like CBA is literally hanging on by a 1-goal Rumson win, you know, and then it's like, well, Southern's kind of hanging on by a 1-goal Rumson loss, and it's like, you know, that whole triumphant, right, of it's like Bergen Ramapo Lakes is like, you know, if we extended our top 20, right, that's in some
If we
order,
rank one, we can't
21,
rank the others. It's like,
right? So it's like, yeah, I personally rank, I dropped Southern totally. I threw in Homedale because my logic was Homedale had just beaten CBA, so I ranked Homedale, but I understand why there. That's like I know you, Anthony. You were like really debating it, and like I know you're a big lax numbers guy, so like lax numbers for you, it's like man, Homedale's not even like super close. So I think at the end of the day, it's just like you just got to like look at who they've beaten, and you're really throwing a dart at a dartboard, especially in that back end, but
Yeah, if I'm not going to rank, I mean, Homestead absolutely has a case, but if I'm not going to rank Kingsway, who is at least winning their games, but they're just not winning their
yeah.
games by a lot, then they're in the same boat as Homedale. They're closer to like 50 than they are in the top 20, in lax numbers. So it's tough to kind of justify when at least, these teams are, battling out against other teams within our, 20, 21, 22, rankings as well.
All I
I do think
know,
it's worth mentioning. I do think it's worth mentioning just because Gil's not here, just because he was the big Kingsway. You know, I think he finally got to the point for Nova and I where it's just like, they had another two games this week that were just super close, and it was like we Notre Dame is a team we talked about, right? Like Notre Dame is destroying people that they're supposed to destroy. Kind of competitive with St. Augustine, but it's like, if you're going to look at Notre Dame, and we're not going to rank Notre Dame, but they're at least playing. They played Hun, they played St. Augustine, and then they destroyed Ridge, they destroyed all the CVC teams they're supposed to destroy. So I think it just, and no, I don't mean to speak for you, but I think it just got to a point for us where it was like, man, we can't justify it anymore. There's too much data to leave them in.
Right. If some of these other teams were playing the same schedule, they would be in a different boat, and I think would be doing better. Bramapo, I think, would be destroying that Kingsway schedule. Bergen, same thing. So it's just tough to kind of sit back here at this point in the season and kind of just let them kind of just keep hanging on.
for anybody watching on YouTube, you've seen me shaking my head over the last 3 minutes because, like many of you out there, you may be thinking the same thing that I am, that you were lied to. You were lied to by the people on this podcast. Because 3 weeks ago, all of you out there in podcast land were told that if no time out for you, Tharp. I'm not done yet. Okay, you were
I
you were
can tell you
told.
why they're not ranked.
No, you were.
I can
We
tell you
were.
why Tony didn't rank them.
We were told that if they beat CBA,
You're
they were
forgetting
going
a
to
key
get
thing.
ranked.
There's one thing you're forgetting. They
I'm gonna
got
let.
boat
Can
raced
I?
by Southern
I
or
would
by
love to.
Rumson.
I would just give me a moment here so that I can defend Homedale Nation, and then I'll give you a chance to respond. Okay?
I ranked them.
Homedale Nation right now is people are climbing up the fire escapes, right? Ready to go to the roof because this was the week we're gonna get ranked, and then lo and behold, nothing. Crickets
Take it away, Tony.
within the top 20. And I'm going to say this for the Homedale folks. If you've never been to Homedale to witness a game, let alone officiate a game, let's just say the Homedale folks are not fans of the officials. I don't really know that there's anything that could go in a direction. They could win, I think, 19-1 in a game, and it would still be a bad day for the officials in the eyes of the Homedale crowd. However, I have some respect for that because I personally think it's hilarious. There is a group of parents that sit way up in this perch at Homedale. I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that there are some pregame sodas involved in whatever's happening there because there's no rational way that the commentary that comes from that area up there is not fueled by Diet Pepsi. And it's hilarious to me. It's hilarious. It's a bit of a moderate home field advantage. And in my opinion, we were told that they should be ranked, and they were not. Go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, they got boat raced by Rumson. That's I ranked them. I'm Team Hornets for the record, but they got boat raced by Rumson. But I'll let Tony take it away.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's just pretty much a par for the course there is they just got kind of, dominated by Rumson, who, squeaks in to us again in the 20, and we couldn't really kind of decide on, kind of where they were at, and ultimately where, I'm deciding on just my 20th spot. Even if I throw Homedale in there, uh, they wouldn't have made the cut. So ultimately, I see it. I get it. They beat CBA, and CBA is the 20th, and they're not the 20th. But I'm also a believer in numbers. Anyone who knows me, who I've coached, knows that I believe in the numbers, and there's enough data for me in those numbers and the lax numbers that Homedale is so far down the list compared to some other teams as well, where they need to be in. But they have a case. I can't straight here and say like they absolutely shouldn't be the another 20th team over CBA when they just beat them. They absolutely have that credit, but they're two games where they've gone absolutely dominated. And then again, CBA was a 1-goal win versus Rumson, who's up there, and that's why they're there. And Homedale did not have that same, let alone win. They got kind of destroyed.
Listen, when there are head coaches out there that they have certain philosophies and things that they believe in, and the success backs it up, like I find it hard to go against that. So the esteemed, very remarkably successful head coach of the Atlanta Falcons, Raheem Morris, said, "Stats are for losers." Oh wait, I forgot. As a loyal Falcons fan, Raheem Morris is no longer the coach of the Atlanta Falcons, so perhaps we should put some credence into the statistics. And I'm gonna just hop on the Homedale train, whether I even believe this or not. I don't know. I just like busting some balls here. I'm on the Homedale train because they beat the number 20 team ranked in the poll, and you guys told me that they would be ranked if they did that. So you know what? Every Homedale burner out there, I hope you're listening. Hop on this and at the boys on the Instagram feed this week. Let's get to our top 10. Coming in at number 10, Shawnee, as we mentioned, they are down from number 5. A little bit of a precipitous drop there for a loss to Westfield, who's a pretty darn good team, we would say. They slotted in at 10. Don Bosco down to number 9 from number 4. Ridgewood up a spot to number 8. Westfield up a spot to 7. Seton Hall Prep goes from 10 to 6. Chatham moves up 2 spots from 7 to 5. Scotch Plains goes from 6 to 4. Del Barton falls 2 spots to number 3 after that loss to Seton Hall Prep. St. Aug's, and this is obviously, boys, where I think a lot of people are going to have an issue, because we talk often about how can you drop a team or not move a team up maybe if they don't lose. And without losing and only having they were number 2. St. Aug's has been number 2 in the poll the entire season long. And the only school ahead of them was Del Barton. Del Barton loses a game to Seton Hall Prep. So you would think all rationality says St. Aug's moves into that top slot, but no, not according to the New Jersey Lacrosse podcast. Summit will come in as the number 1 team this week, beginning April 20th, and they leapfrog St. Aug's. Why?
Well, the beauty is there doesn't always have to be rationale in a New Jersey Lacrosse podcast. But ultimately, Summit has two comparative teams that the St. Augie's has also played, and in both cases, Summit has a better score. So when you're going kind of through it, that's kind of, I think, the ultimate reason why they got the bump, paired with, if you're looking at just in-state resume, what has Summit done, what has Augie's do blind resume testing, it's not even close with the amount of top 10 wins that Summit has compared to St. Augustine. So Summit's due their respect, the way that they're playing lacrosse, and Augie's will have their time to shine. But right now, I think just what Summit has put together and the dominance of how they have done that in some key games is why they're at the number 1 spot right now.
Yeah, for me, we talk and debate, and we kind of yell at each other in our group chat of like, how did you do this? Why'd you do this? And for me, it was actually kind of easy because St. Augustine's done a lot of great things out of state. They played Episcopal tight. They just beat Radnor this weekend, but their number 1 win in the state of New Jersey, which is how we've been pretty clear that like really the biggest thing for us is in-state We're going to put most of our weight into that. And Summit has 2 wins over our number 4, and I believe Seton Hall came in at 7, somewhere around there, right? So they have those wins. St. Augustine is hanging their hat on a win over Haddonfield, who comes in at 15 or 16. And then both teams played Morristown. Summit had the bigger win against Morristown. So I think at the end of the day, St. Augustine, and this is kind of the fight that the prep schools are having these days, is finding good quality in-state competition. And St. Augustine just hasn't had those opportunities yet. This week they play CBA. They have a big game against Seton Hall coming up at the end of the season. Like, they're going to have their chances, but I think for right now, how I think for me personally, bumping Summit up to 1 is the least offensive thing we've done this week. I kind of have an issue of some of the rankings after number 3, but I think Summit's kind of earned that number 1 spot for now. I think St. Augustine is, like Nova said, they're going to have their opportunities. They're obviously still uber talented, but they just don't have that in-state resume that we kind of sculpt this top 20 run. That's why Bosco's at 9 and Shawnee's at 10. You highlighted Shawnee's dropping, but if you look at Shawnee's in-state opponents, they don't they don't have any quality in-state wins there. I think their wins are against a Cherry Hill directional school, and like Rancocas Valley. And Bosco has a win over Ramapo, but like we talked about, Ramapo's top 25 team. Every team above them has higher quality in-state wins. So, like Nova said, like seeing Bosco at 9 is weird, but I think we can really rationalize it with how we do our rankings and what we believe in.
It's interesting to me that, and I'm calling ourselves out here on this, by the way, and I understand on some level the reasoning for it, but we're not putting a ton of stock in a cross-state, out-of-state game, however you want to reference it. But as we all know, that as the season goes on, we have a better idea of who's who and what's what because of crossover games. And one of the biggest reasons why you all hate the PowerPoint system, which we're going to get into in the next couple of weeks because we don't even really know what the PowerPoints are, and I'm sure Tharpy will take us through that, next week to lead us off. But we say that the PowerPoint system is bad because it doesn't weight the game against that out-of-state team more than anything relative to 500, and it's almost like we're gonna poo-poo in our poll, well, they don't have an in-state win, as if, like, let's just say their schedule was, hey, we beat St. Anthony's from Long Island, but we had to play 2 county opponents, so we played so-and-so directional and something tech, and as if the St. Anthony's win wouldn't mean anything. Now, this doesn't need to be the great debate, but I think we need to understand that there's some of these games that are at least giving us a little bit of a direction into just how strong or not strong they might be. And a game that we didn't even mention that's happening this week is Tuesday at Rutgers. St. Augs is playing Garden City, so from New York. So while we may not highlight that as a big game where we can use it as an evaluative tool because it's not 2 in-state teams, I think we have a pretty decent idea about what a team like Garden City is bringing to the table.
I mean, counterpoint is like Bosco beat Chaminade and then just lost to Northern Highlands. Like, I think it's like we have to like base it all upon like the at the end of the season, you're competing in the postseason against the New Jersey teams. Like, and not to be like no shit, Sherlock, but like that's how we're evaluating you against the field, right? It's the same thing they do for the NCAA tournament or for the college basketball tournament. Like, they do, what's your resume against the teams that qualify for the tournament? And I think that's how like that's like, if you, like Noah said, if you were blind resume, right? Blind, totally blind. Like, Shawnee and Bosco have literally no right to be ranked in New Jersey. However, we know they're very good because Shawnee's won out of state games. We know Bosco, has won out of state games. They've been super competitive in these games. So I think it's like we acknowledge it, Keith, but we're not. It's hard to justify moving you above Ridgewood, for example, who's beaten Chatham. That's how I look at it.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think at times it could be used a little bit, to play devil's advocate for sure, is as a crutch or just as an excuse for why we're doing something. We certainly, I can't say that we don't look at the out of state scores and they have no bearing on what we're doing. Like that's absolutely not true at all. When I just mentioned Summit and St. Augustine and why they're what, and one of the same teams that they have is an out of state opponent in Radnor. So yes, I don't think it doesn't like move the needle like drastically. Like if Pingree goes out and they beat St. Anthony's, we're not gonna be like, well, we know how good St. Anthony's is. Let's catapult them up past all these other teams. Because at the same time, some of these teams just aren't afforded that opportunity. I'm sure many schools would like to go out there, but some of them, whether they can't afford it or whether the school doesn't allow it, they're not allowed the same opportunities as some of these other schools. So we want to keep it as relevant to New Jersey. We are the New Jersey Lacrosse podcast as possible, but at the same time, we absolutely are still looking out of state teams, but it's not going to drastically rise or drop you in the rankings. It might help you move a spot or two, or as already stated, when talking about a Bosco and a Shawnee, keep you in the conversation relevant. Because we know how good those teams freaking are. So but it's a fair argument to be had there, Keith.
It's the series we don't rank like Lawrenceville or like a Blair Academy. It's like we're ranking teams that compete in the NJSIAA tournament. I think that's
right, which that's why Blair and Lawrenceville aren't ranked, and Patty isn't ranked within the top 20, but to say, like, just to point this out, and we don't need to belabor this point, but it is what it is. And quite frankly, I'm only bringing it up because I don't think there's anything wrong with it. That out of your mouth 2 seconds ago, whether you realized you said it or not, Tharp, you said, if not for the out-of-state teams, Shawnee and Bosco don't have any business being ranked. And then right after that, it was, well, we value the New Jersey games more than anything else. Well, which one is it? So, like, I just don't think there's anything wrong with saying, like, hey, we're going to give greater weight to I think a little more like what you were going after, Nova, to say, we're going to give greater weight to some of those in-state matchups there because it's just easier and we have more data points, to compare. But I don't know that we could speak out of both sides of our mouth there, nor do I think that it's even something that we should be ashamed of. They're, in my opinion, valid data points. Maybe we might weight them a little bit less because they are not in-state opponents, but, for the same reason why we love lax numbers, that as the season goes on, those teams, whether they reside in New Jersey or not, we can lend some more or less weight to a win or a loss, based on how strong we think the team is. I mean, I don't know. I just think it's one of the great things about lax numbers. So to say that we're discounting the out-of-state wins or games is moderately disingenuous. It's the only thing I'll say, because I know that I'm sure some of the burners out there will look at it and go, you guys are full of shit. So it's fine. Anything else, boys, before we get to the stall warning?
Well, according to the PowerPoints, all these out-of-state teams have a 500 record anyway, so.
Well, we're not going to get into the PowerPoints because we're still not using PowerPoints to rank anybody.
We need to do a little more investigative journalism before we really dive in.
We do.
PowerPoints, you're in the crosshairs.
I would agree, and potentially rightly so. So it's we're coming up on the 2-minute mark here. The game is less than 5 goals in the spread, and we're going to keep it in the box now. It's the stall warning, the dumbest part of our podcast every week. So there's a thing out there that I think if you live in society, it's typically 3 choices when you're sitting around hanging out and you want to give somebody a set of choices about anything. and it's usually starts with the initials F, M, and K. But this is a family podcast. This is a podcast intended for many high school students. So instead of using the normal terminology that we might use in that 3-word comparison chart, and I also thought we needed a 4th option here, we're going to go with, I'm going to give you guys some options, okay? And you're going to tell me which one of these options you're going to make love to, which one you're going to seriously date, which one you're going to give the ring to, and then which one you're going to violently eliminate, okay? So making love, seriously dating.
Why am I just seeing this now? This is ridiculous.
I don't know why you are just reading this now. I mentioned this much earlier.
I know
to
it's
you
been
guys.
up there. Oh my goodness.
Okay. Here are your options. These are food options because I had a fantastic meal this afternoon. Pizza, pasta, any variety you want, pasta. Tacos, any kind of tacos you want. Dessert, any dessert you want. Pizza, pasta, tacos, dessert. Make love, seriously date, give the ring, violently eliminate. Tharp, you go first.
This is the dumbest one. I think this is worse than the Easter Bunny.
No, that is
right,
so ridiculous that you would think this is dumber than the Easter Bunny question. The Easter Bunny question was by far the dumbest thing.
At least it was
All
on
right.
Easter.
I'm gonna violently eliminate tacos, or I enjoy going to Moe's or Chipotle, but I'm gonna violently eliminate tacos. I gotta read your wording again. Seriously, Dave.
Pizza, pasta, dessert.
So, all right,
I don't want to say pasta. I'm gonna
make love to a nice chicken parm. I'm gonna make love to a chicken parm with a side of rigatoni.
You're adding a protein to this. Okay, I got it. All right, but it's fine. It's yours.
I'm gonna seriously date the pizza, specifically a nice buffalo chicken pizza, and then I'm gonna give the ring to dessert, so like a nice fat cake.
What kind?
You know what kind, cuz.
That was, I don't even know what that was right there.
We got that.
No, we cannot. We will not cut that.
I don't know, man. Just a nice warm plate of chocolate chip cookies.
Okay. All right. That's fine. Nova, what do you got?
Oh, okay. Well, I think I'm going to give the ring to the pizza, because the pizza, you can literally have all this stuff on pizza. So I want to keep pizza around for as long as possible. You can have dessert pizza, you can have pasta on your pizza, you can have a taco pizza. So I'm going to give the ring to pizza here. So I'm going to violently eliminate tacos, just because I can already have it on my pizza if I really wanted to. And then this is a tough choice. I'm probably going to seriously date dessert, just because I like dessert so much. And then make love to pasta, and it's not great. It's not great.
All right. I mean, I applaud it was a very referee answer to come up with some kind of gray area response where you can somehow have all the things, even though I told you had to not have all the things. But that was a good answer. I am going to violently eliminate pasta. If I never had pasta again, I don't really know that I would be all that upset. And it doesn't really matter. Marinara, any of it, I enjoy it, but not missing it if I never had it again, quite frankly. I'm going to seriously date tacos, like a nice grilled shrimp taco with some spicy sriracha sauce, a little lettuce pico, soft shell, love it. Seriously dating dessert, which if this was actual relationship, dessert and pizza would be in a fist fight over me, because that's how much I enjoy both of them. I would seriously date the dessert, probably a warm skillet cookie with some vanilla ice cream on top.
Yep.
So good.
Good answer.
Pizza, shout out Pizza Uno. Okay, just get the cookie skillet, extra ice cream. You're golden.
All day. Yep.
All day.
You live close enough to Robbinsville. Are you a Di Lorenzo's or Papa's guy?
I'm in a Malfe's Lawrenceville guy. Okay, I may be close enough there, but I'm going hometown. Okay, hometown, as Pat McAfee would say. And I am absolutely giving the ring to pizza. I could eat pizza every day of the week.
All day.
Yeah, for sure.
Are you a pizza snob, or like will you like crush a DiGiorno, or are you like, no, I need the
Oh, I will absolutely crush a DiGiorno, but I will also posit out to the public that I am a pizza snob because I grew up in Bayonne, New Jersey. And if you would say, I don't really even know what that means, then you need to come to Bayonne, New Jersey City, and you need to get some pizza because it's a different world. Okay, it's a totally different world. So that's all I have to say about that because there's nothing I could tell you that would describe it in a way in which it would satisfy all of you that think I'm an idiot. And that's going to do it for another dumb edition of the New Jersey Lacrosse Podcast. We are not, boys, we're 9 episodes into this already. I can't even believe it. But I will say, as much as we want to say we're like running through the season and it's almost over, it's not. It is not almost over. We still have a lot of lacrosse left, like almost 2 months. State final or TOC final, not TOC. Group
At
finals.
least 8 episodes left. Yeah,
We got a whole mess of episodes left. There's a lot of lacrosse to be watched, to be officiated, and to be coached. And I know that I think I speak for all of us here, boys, when we can't wait to talk about all of it to you each and every week on Monday morning in your podcast feed, unless Gil doesn't really feel like putting it in the podcast feed for Monday mornings and or the overtime episodes, in which case we tell people that they're going to drop on certain dates, but then don't because Gil just doesn't put it in there.
Can I drop a little teaser for next week?
By all means.
Next week, everyone's favorite episode, our mid-season awards episode. So if you have any nominations, we do coach of the year and then positional. So attack, midfielder, goalie, defenseman of the year. And then do we do a team of the year? No. So if you have any nominations for coach or positional player of the year
last year.
So okay, yeah. So or face-up specialist.
Yep.
Okay, so I'm
if
gonna
you have any nominations, DM the send a DM to New Jersey Lacrosse Podcast. That's always a fun episode to do, and shout out some players on the great things they're doing.
I'm gonna analogize what we do next week to being Dane Brugler's mock draft the morning after the conclusion of this NFL draft. It's one of the most meaningless things ever. But allow me to introduce and fully pump everybody up for next week. And next week on the New Jersey Lacrosse Podcast, one of the most meaningless things that anyone will ever hear, the mid-season awards, which mean absolutely nothing because there's an entire second half of the season yet to come. Next week on the New Jersey Lacrosse Podcast, in your podcast feed, we think
it's you.
We think it'll be in your podcast feed next Monday, unless Gil's lazy. Don't miss it. For Anthony,
he's with his sick kid. He's with his sick kid. Gil, you hear this? Remember who's got your back.
Whoa!
You just take pot shots at Gil when he's not here.
I'm not even.
It's not nice.
I wish he was here so that he could try to defend himself because there's no defense for what he's done, other than him hating refs, and that's fine too. He's just bitter because he did
something, but you can't tell Dave Duban this. Dave Duban, if you're listening, plug your ears. I thought he was great on the podcast last week on the OT episode. I'm being very serious. I thought he was fantastic. Some great insight.
We got a lot of love.
Seems like he would be a great fifth chair on the show, but alas, he'll never hear this because his ears are closed.
Maybe we'll allow him into the pod for one time as the season goes on.
Can you tell him that I like him now so we can like mend fences that we didn't even know were broken?
You can't tell somebody that you like them through an intermediary, okay? Unless you're like in 3rd grade. Do you want me to hand him a note where it says like, do you like me now with a checkbox?
Yes.
No, yes. I refuse.
Exactly.
I refuse to do it. You're going to have to, like a real man, you're going to have to hide behind your keyboard and send him some kind of text or DM and ask him if you guys are okay now.
Nope, he'll never hear this. That's a shame.
Good Lord.
Okay, I have one shout out in all seriousness.
All right, please, as if this needs to go any longer.
No, we played Bridgewater on Saturday, and I thought the Bridgewater lacrosse team was one of the most rule-educated teams I've ever played against. I'm not even kidding. They were very disciplined. Like we had a kid whose helmet came off, and they were like yelling, "He's got to come out of the game." and it was just like honestly it was really impressive. Like as someone who like you guys make fun of me, I try and like know all the rules. I was really impressed with Bridgewater, and I thought that they were just super knowledgeable of the game in general. So and in all seriousness, I thought that was just I wanted to acknowledge that because I think we give a lot of hate. We joke a lot around here, but I thought that was pretty impressive. I thought there was a really great game with them on Saturday.
I appreciate your compliment, especially as it comes to teams knowing the rules. But that's also like kind of like saying that like Del Barton's going to be good at lacrosse. Tharp. Hey, Bridgewater was well coached. They know what they're doing. That's not exactly breaking news.
All right, man. I just was trying to say something nice for God's sake.
Well, I'm not allowing you to say anything nice here, okay? I have to stay on
well,
brand.
you all heard it. Bridgewater Burners, go lightly on me this week. All right, you heard it.
That's going to do it for episode 9 of the New Jersey Lacrosse Podcast in 2026.
This was the craziest episode.
I have no clue what kind of overtime episode we're going to come up with. We have a couple of potential options in the hopper. I hope we drop something for you on Friday if I have a chance to sit down with any one of the couple of guests that we potentially might talk to. So that's the world's biggest tease. And outside of that, we'll see you back in your podcast feeds and on YouTube 1 week from today on April 27th, as we will bring you episode 10. But have a great week of lacrosse in the state of New Jersey for Anthony Terranova and Bill Tharp, and for the absentee parent, Gil Swenson, who really isn't being an absentee parent. He's actually parenting his kids, which is why he's here, not here. Thanks for watching.
Everyone.